Hello there. Welcome to a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening, or if you're listening on 740 KVOR, KVOR.com, or the KVOR app, and both the Extra Sports and KVOR app, coincidentally, both sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. That's what we call in the business synergy. And to that end, I welcome those of you listening to the show on our new home, 740 KVOR. So now, and I feel weird saying this because if you're listening, then you've obviously found the show, and wherever you're listening, you're good. Just keep it here and you'll be fine. But I will throw out all the particulars that now this show that has been airing on Extra Sports 1300 in one form or another for more than a decade is now also being aired on 740 KVOR. And I'm very excited to be able to be doing that. I think it says something about what this show is and the value it provides to you, the audience. I know it might be a little bit different than what you KVOR listeners get in the afternoon, but it's more local talk that you can be a part of. And that's kind of the goal here with this show. And if you are just coming upon this show for the first time, just to let you know that I think you'll like it. The listeners that you're going to hear from that hit up the text line or call into the show, whether it's Brett or Tom or Albert or any number of listeners that routinely interact with the show, you'll love them. They'll love you. It'll be great. Very excited about this. And it's happening at a time where, man, it can't get much hotter for local sports, can it? So let us proceed. If you would like to interact with the show, it's easily done. Program this number into your phone. It is 719-247-1313. You can call or text into that number and have your say on the day's topics. And I would guess if you're feeling especially opinionated about something today, it would be about the Denver Broncos. And that's where I would like to start. Now, this year's Week 18 was not quite the party that last year's was. Remember last year's game, Week 18 against the Kansas City Chiefs JV, that was just that the route was on immediately, and it was just a celebration of a playoff drought ended. Now, you could argue that yesterday's accomplishment was a greater one. I mean, yeah, getting into the playoffs for the first time in a long time is a big deal, but everything that the Broncos clinched yesterday is a bigger deal. But if you're a Broncos fan, you didn't have the chance to take it easy yesterday. It wasn't, what was the score last year? 38-7 or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, yesterday's game against a severely, I won't call them the Chargers junior varsity, but it was a Chargers team that was missing almost all the players other than Keenan Allen because he had to earn a bonus. Missed no Herbert, no Mack, no Derwin James. But in a 19-3 win, even though I don't think there was any point in that game where you were legitimately worried that the Denver Broncos would lose that game. Trey Lance was not going to lead the Chargers to victory, but it wasn't as smooth sailing. It wasn't as much of a party as perhaps last year's Week 18 was when the Denver Broncos clinched. But I was thinking about it yesterday. Isn't that kind of fitting, though? I mean, isn't that somewhat emblematic of what this Broncos season has been? The Broncos haven't coasted or dominated this season hardly at all. I mean, the Cincinnati game, the Cowboys game, you could argue, but it's mostly been sitting at the edge of your seat, sweating it out a little bit as the Denver Broncos eventually win. I mean, they set a record this season for the most wins by one score in a single season in NFL history. No one has done what the Denver Broncos did this year and win 11 one-score games. It's ridiculous how good they were in one-score games. And yesterday wasn't a one-score game, but it had some of the same elements, which most notably is you maybe being slightly worried about the Broncos' chances of winning that game. But I've said this, and if you've been listening to the show on Extra Sports 1300, you've heard me say this. If you're new to the show, this will be the first time. I think there is a confidence, even though you're going to sweat it out. You're a fan, right? You're prone to wild swings of emotion. There is a confidence that you have built up with this football team, yes? Even when all of these games have gone down to the fourth quarter or gone down to the wire or aren't blowouts, still deep in your brain or your heart, depending on what you watch Broncos games with first and foremost, there's a confidence there. And it's a confidence that comes from the fact that 11 times this year, the Denver Broncos have come out on top in a one-score game. And I do think that the Denver Broncos deserve credit for being able, you don't win that many one-score games by happenstance, by luck. I just don't believe that. There is a skill involved with it. And the Denver Broncos have close to perfected that skill. It's remarkable how this team, when the game is up in the air, when it is going to be decided, that ball seemingly never bounces the other way. It always bounces the way of the Denver Broncos. But that was Sean Payton's plan all along. That's his formula. And what it is winning in the margins. Right? Those things that, any one of those things is not ultimately enough to win a game. But you add all of these things up, and that's how you win football games. That's how Sean Payton chooses to win football games. Things like a good defense, a good running game, being better on special teams, hammering into the head of Bo Nix that he needs to avoid costly mistakes at all costs, right? He's hammered it into Bo Nix's brain. Do not take sacks. Although, ironically, yesterday, he got sacked quite a bit. But we're taking a big picture view. We'll get into the micro of yesterday in a little bit. But he's hammered it into Bo Nix's head repeatedly. Don't take sacks. Don't put the ball in harm's way. Now, the latter is a little bit tougher for Bo Nix to do. But Sean Payton helps him a little bit with the play calling. Right over the course of the season, I've heard from Broncos fans that have been quite frustrated with the play calling of Sean Payton, and I have maintained that it is how the Broncos win. It's not how you may like the Broncos to win, but it's how the Broncos win. And Sean Payton knows that. But basically, Sean Payton, throughout the course of this season, has gotten his team to minimize all these variables that come up. How about last night in a game I got to get to later? The Ravens and the Steelers. Special teams. Those margins. How large did they loom in that football game? All of these variables that pop up, maybe not every game, but they're variables that can pop up and cost you a football game. Sean Payton has gotten this team to minimize all of those variables far more often than not, to set it up to where he and his coaching staff ultimately become the difference in the football game. That's what this all is set up to do. Controlling all of these variables that Sean Payton himself can only go so far to controlling based on his play calling or the decisions that he makes. A lot of player things where the players are responsible. He's been able to coach them up to minimize those. So now it's just him and the guy across the sideline from him. And 14 times this year, it's worked. If the Broncos aren't going to have all of these things come up in games that cost teams, like missed kicks or a quarterback trying to play hero ball, comes down to Sean Payton, which is the way he wanted it. When he came back out of pseudo-retirement to take the Broncos job, he wanted an ownership group that would let him do it his way. His coaches, his players, his playing style, everything about him and his vision. There hasn't been a lot of give and take. It's been my way or the highway. But it's very difficult to argue with the results. And what is even more remarkable of the job that Sean Payton did this year to get the Broncos to the number 1 seed is that if you really look at them, they do not compare favorably when it comes to experience and in some cases talent to some of their peers. They're starting the AFC playoffs with the 7th best quarterback on that side of the bracket, to say nothing of how Bo Nix would rank on the NFC side. Go ahead, look at the AFC quarterbacks. Bo Nix is 7th, but yet his team is in 1st. This is a Broncos team that is still incredibly young. I saw a stat that only 10 players on the roster are 29 or older. That's it. This has been draft and developed, but the development has happened faster than I think a lot of people, I'll raise my hand, anticipated. This team being the number 1 seed is so far ahead of schedule. Regardless of what happens from here on out, and we'll get into conversations over the coming weeks about where the bar is set now, what the goals are, what would be a disappointment for this team. But you have to say for this regular season, they overachieved. They're ahead of schedule. Made the playoffs year 2, number 1 seed year 3. Sean Payton's plan worked. And he's been able to coach up a young, inexperienced group of players with perhaps less talent than some of their peers and get them to play a winning brand of football when it matters the most. Broncos still have their problems with penalties, not when the game is in the balance. Bo Nix is prone to his mistakes and has his shortcomings, not when it matters the most. So the credit to Sean Payton is he was able to get a team that really didn't know how to win. And he got them to win more than anybody else in the AFC, save for New England. It's a remarkable job they did, if not for the fact that there are so many other deserving candidates for Coach of the Year. I think Sean Payton would be on the short list of contenders for that. But what Vrabel has done, and Mike McDonald and Kyle Shanahan and Ben Johnson, there's just a lot of candidates. But what Sean Payton has done in many years would warrant being recognized as the Coach of the Year. Here's Sean Payton on all the goodies that his team will now get being the number 1 seed.
When people ask, like, all right, what's the benefit of the 1 seed? Many will say it's the rest. I personally think it's the elimination of a game that you don't have to play. And, man, I'm proud of our team. Sit here with 14 wins and line them up, and all you can do is play them. You can't control when you're playing them.
And I think the end there is a little bit of a nod to the inevitable discourse that's going to happen between now and when the Broncos take the field again, that they might be one of the most vulnerable 1 seeds that we have had in recent NFL history. That's going to be discussed. We've had this conversation on this show before. Many a time. Who have the Broncos beaten? Well, this win doesn't look that great in hindsight. I think Sean Payton may be firing back preemptively at some of that with that last part. But the first part of it, isn't that getting a bye? Isn't that what that means? It's rest, but you don't have a game. Like, we're talking about the same thing, and that's part of the Sean Payton experience too. There is a little bit of I'm the smartest guy in the room. It's not what you say, it's what I say. Oh, but we're saying the same thing. No, but I'm saying it my way. There's a little bit of that. But given the job he has done, I guess you can't totally blame him for suffering from that syndrome a little bit. And when you're racking and stacking this AFC playoff field, as we will do today and moving forward, this thing's wide open. So what you have to decide is what matters the most to you. Coaching's got to be on that list somewhere, right? I think that the Broncos would have that edge in every game that they play in this postseason. Home field would matter, right? Broncos have that. And Broncos have they rest, they have a bye week, or they don't have to play an extra game. Let's use the way Sean Payton said. You have to decide in a wide open field in the AFC with no Chiefs, no Burrow, no Lamar, what you value the most. And if coaching is at the top of that list, then I think what this regular season has shown you is you probably should back Sean Payton's team. I'll take your thoughts on the Broncos clinching the number 1 seed, 719-24-7, 13-13. Just getting going on a Monday edition of Drive Time Sports, both on Extra Sports 1300 and now proudly on 740 KVOR. Well, you heard the three-time MVP. This is Drive Time Sports on Extra Sports 1300, and now also on 740 KVOR. And I said earlier that the people that tune into my show interact with the show. You're going to love them if you're just discovering the show for the first time. Two of them that have checked in already. Aaron called in during the break, regular caller to the show. And I did not forget you, SoCal. See, that's the problem. You go up there for an Oscar acceptance speech and you're going to leave somebody out. I did not mean to intentionally leave anyone out. SoCal Dave, great contributor to this show. And you will get his thoughts on things. This is an interactive experience. It don't, I could talk to a wall for 7 straight hours. Like, I can do that. I think the better product is you being a part of the show at 719-247 1313. Text coming in from a couple of different texts. First from the it's from Steve from the 575 about the Broncos and how remarkable it is that this team is sitting here as the top seed in the AFC. Says only 2 games this season have the Broncos led the entire game. They are not what you would picture a number 1 seed, because to be quite honest, look at the world that we've been living in. Right? For the last 30 years, it's been Brady, Mahomes. Obviously, Brady for a more significant chunk of that time. But we've always had that one team that, even if we don't pick them to be the number 1 seed or get out of the AFC, we know that they are factoring into it. We say that to say, we almost frame it as, if there's going to be a team that knocks off New England or more recently knocks off Kansas City, it's going to be Team X. Because they're the constant. And for many years, both Mahomes and Brady were dominant. Winning games by double digits, leading for the entirety of the game throughout the season. And we just don't have that. So the Broncos, in a way, are quite fitting to be this year's number 1 seed, because we don't have those traditional powers. Or some of the traditional powers, like Josh Allen, has to take the long road to the Super Bowl. Even Buffalo's not sitting there with home field advantage of any kind. So it's just a very different world right now in the AFC. And in that way, I think that the Broncos being the number 1 seed and getting the number 1 seed the way they did is kind of perfect for what this AFC is, which is wide open. You don't love any of these teams, but you can't, write off any of them either. I mean, you really can't. These AFC playoffs are going to be wild. And the Broncos get to wait a week before they join the proceedings. They're their last team into the Royal Rumble. This coming in from Brett defending Sean Payton. Heard something different. So Sean Payton, I thought, he's being asked about having the rest, and it's not the rest. It's not having another game. Brett says the difference between playing one less game or not, he was trying to say he would rather prep for one team for 2 weeks versus 2 teams for 1 week. Granted, he won't know who he plays, but he can certainly start watching film on his next opponent and have time to do it. It is also 1 game less you have to worry about key injuries. And wasn't that the thing? And I get that, but at the same time, we're all saying the same thing. Getting a bye week has all of this stuff. And to say that rest, which the injury thing would be part of the rest, right? Injuries would be benefited by not playing a game, by resting. So we're all saying the same thing, but it's Sean Payton going, it's not what you say it is, it's what I say it is, even though we all understand that it's all encompassing. There are a lot of goodies that come along with being the number one seed. But how about that for yesterday? I mean, here's my biggest takeaway, and this is across the National Football League. We have one too many games. One too many games. I was against extending the regular season to a 17th game. I saw no point in it. And once again, I have sat back and watched a week 18 in the National Football League with only about 3 games that matter. And the only thing that was ultimately decided that could not have been decided in week 17 was the NFC South. Right? Because if you ended the season at 17 games or at 17 weeks, 16 games, Broncos would have been in. They would have had the number one seed. They're only at risk of losing it. And then they go up against the team, the Chargers, that didn't care about that game. I mean, CBS, you were watching the broadcast, I'm sure. I didn't even know what other games were going on in the 2:00 window because all they wanted to show was the score in New England and the score in Buffalo. That was it. I mean, there was seating on the line in the NFC, and CBS is like, yeah, we don't care about these games. Now, they go to Adam Shine every once in a while when Stafford threw that pass that Nakua had that ridiculous catch on yesterday. We have one too many games, which is quite the coincidence considering that the NFL, despite my and many other people's pleadings, added an additional game to a season that was perfect in length. So what did you have yesterday? You had PJ Locke getting hurt. You had Garrett Bowles getting hurt. Now, thankfully, Garrett Bowles for the Broncos came back in. PJ Locke, we'll see what he is. Obviously, they get a whole week. I mean, that was one of the big takeaways from yesterday, right? Was the guys that were getting banged up as the game was going along, and you're like, oh, I want that, especially Garrett Bowles. Could you have imagined? I'm sure you did because you were thinking it when Garrett Bowles was face down on the ground. How much that would change things for the Denver Broncos if Garrett Bowles was out? And for what? A cash grab. That's all it was. We could have cut the season off at 17 weeks, 16 games. Nothing would be different. And I enjoyed last night's game as much as the next person, but look at the results. Steelers, you could have ended the season after the Steelers lost to the Browns, and guess what? The Steelers would have been division champions. That nonsense that was going on in the NFC South with the Bucs beating the Panthers, but now the Panthers are division champions because the Falcons won. That's the only thing of relevance. Or I should say the only thing that needed to be decided. I think Keenan Allen and his bank account was glad there was an 18th game, I think, or 18th week, 17th game. I think that Myles Garrett was happy about that so he could get the sack record. So on a case-by-case basis, maybe, but on the whole, we don't need 18 weeks of NFL football. Give us 17 with 16 games, and let's get the playoffs going. And as a Broncos fan, to see PJ Locke and especially Garrett Bowles just lying on the ground in a game that 3-4 years ago would not even have existed with everything that the Broncos have to play for. Like, if you weren't on my side when it comes to the length of an NFL season before, you probably were in that moment that Garrett Bowles was down. You really would have been on my side if it would have been announced that Garrett Bowles was out for the rest of the season. But that is part of it. Absolutely. Prep. Broncos can get a head start in their prep. They can rest. They can recover. They can just automatically go to the next round. Like, there's a ton of benefits to it. They're all encompassing. Sean Payton values one of those goodies more than the others. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, how bad is it going to get without Nikola Jokic on the Denver Nuggets? Nuggets Nation, don't miss your chance to lock in a pick'em plan for the 2025-26 season starting at just $100. You get to choose 4 games at Ball Arena, save on fees, and get priority access for the 2026 playoffs. Secure your pick'em plan at nuggets.com/pick'em. It's a good deal. I would just maybe wait till February, perhaps, to lock in your pick'em plan games. Or when you do, just make sure you pick games that are a little bit later because if you have not seen, Nikola Jokic is hurt. Now, what can't be all doom and gloom because the news that came back when he was stepped on by Spencer Jones and his knee buckled, the fact that it's a hyperextension and there's no ligament damage is the best case scenario. He's going to be reevaluated in 3 weeks. However, that does not mean that there aren't real consequences for the Denver Nuggets in the meantime. Like, yes, there is a worst case scenario where Nikola Jokic is lost for the season. And Jamal Murray said it after that Miami game. He was just hoping it wasn't the same thing that happened to him. And remember how much of Jamal Murray's ascent that we missed because he was hurt. So, yes, that's the worst case scenario, but that's not to say that there aren't real consequences for the Denver Nuggets to not having Nikola Jokic for a month. And let's just leave it at a month and be optimistic that it won't be any longer than that. But you've probably already seen, if you've been watching the Nuggets over these last 3 games, or if not, you will see it if you start watching the Nuggets without Jokic. You'll see how valuable this guy is. In case there was any doubt. Around these parts, I don't think there is. But in case there is doubt, watch the Denver Nuggets without Nikola Jokic and tell me that there is a more valuable player in the NBA than that guy. There's not. And what's cruelly ironic about this whole thing is that him being out for a month probably means he will not be eligible to win the MVP this year. He will probably not meet that 65-game threshold. But while he is out, it will further the idea that there is not one player on any NBA team right now more important to his team than Nikola Jokic is to the Denver Nuggets. And what you have gotten over the last 3 games is a plucky Nuggets team that's trying to keep the ship afloat without their captain. And Jamal Murray, by the way, not that this is necessarily a good thing. I think he was already trending in this direction. Jamal Murray will now be an all-star because he'll have to shoulder so much of the burden and already has. In the last 2 games, he's had 30 plus and 24. He was already playing at an all-star level, and now he's the guy without Nikola Jokic. So if there is a positive, I think this certainly puts Jamal Murray's all-star chances over the top, and he's going to be an all-star. But that's not enough. And you've seen it for 2 games now. It's not enough. They even got back Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown yesterday against the Nets, and it wasn't enough. But the team is battling, right? The team scrapped and got a hard-fought win in Toronto over a good Raptors team. And then they battled with Cleveland over the weekend, fell just short by 5 points. Yesterday, the score was a little bit more lopsided at 12. But this Nuggets team is battling. They're fighting. They're trying. The problem is they just simply do not know what to do without Nikola Jokic on the floor. It's like, what would happen to the planets if you just remove the sun? If the planets didn't have the sun to revolve around, what would happen? This is the basketball version of that. I'm sure there's a Hollywood blockbuster made about that subject. But everybody's movement is off of what Nikola Jokic does. And you see a team that they're playing hard, they're trying to win basketball games. It's not like they are devoid of talent without him, but they're rudderless. You know, they're orchestra without its conductor. To throw another metaphor, just pick your favorite one. And that's going to get a little bit better. But you know what would have really helped? If they didn't also lose Jonas Valanciunas. Like when Nikola Jokic went down, my thought was, well, man, how good does it look to have Jonas Valanciunas? And then as soon as I spoke that into the universe, the basketball god said, you don't get him either, Denver Nuggets. At least with Valanciunas, you'd be able to run some of the same actions, do some of the same things offensively, just probably not to the success rate you would if you had Nikola Jokic. Now you don't have either one of them. You don't have Nikola Jokic and you don't have Nikola Jokic's stand-in. And David Adelman right now, he's just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. Yesterday, he brought Aaron Gordon off the bench. And look, you could sit here and say, well, it's only a month. In the grand scheme of things, what does that matter? This is the Western Conference we're talking about. The Denver Nuggets have already, in just 3 games without Nikola Jokic, have already dropped 1 spot in the standings. In the next 48 hours, they could be in 7th place in the Western Conference. There is your consequence. In the Western Conference, you can't afford to go through a dry spell. You can't have a losing streak. You can't lose your best player and expect it to be okay. The Denver Nuggets are not going to be able to win an NBA title if they have to go through the play-in. I'll just say that right here and now on January 5th. If the Nuggets are in the play-in, they're not winning the title. That is not a road that you can traverse, even if you are getting back Nikola Jokic. If they fall in the standings, it's understandable. I'm not putting fault on anyone. I'm not saying this is an indictment of David Adelman, although we're really going to find out how good of a coach David Adelman is over the next 3 weeks now. But I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not criticizing anybody. What, the Nuggets should be less dependent on one of the best players of his generation? Like, get out of here. And they had somebody. They did the thing that we've been begging them to do, and that's get a capable backup center. And they did that, and he's hurt. So no one's at fault here. And it's understandable if the Nuggets fall down the standings, but in the Western Conference that is absolutely loaded, they can't afford it. They can't afford to be playing in the play-in. And then you want to talk about having, if you survive that, another manufactured cash grab by a league. We're talking about 17th game in the NFL. How about the play-in for the NBA? I could do away with that. Never been a fan of it. But if you survive that, Now you don't get home court in any series that you have moving forward. I mean, you're going to meet up with OKC at some point, so I guess you might as well do it earlier. But there are real consequences for this team if they end up falling further. And I don't see the Nuggets falling any further than 7th. If I'm looking absolute worst case scenario, when Nikola Jokic is back in now 3 weeks' time, I would say at worst the Nuggets are going to be the 7th seed. But that's not a good seed. You're staring the play-in in the face. And usually the teams that are in the play-in aren't really that good. The Nuggets would be a very different animal to be in that 7, 8, 9, 10 play-in. So any idea, Nikola Jokic, he'll be fresher when he comes back because there aren't these minutes that he's logging. To say nothing of the fact that he's dealing with an injury. It's not the guy didn't go on vacation for a month. But that's nonsense because in the Western Conference you can't. In the East, look at the Boston Celtics. They don't have arguably their best player in Jason Tatum, and they're doing just fine. Now, it's a credit to Jaylen Brown and Derek White and Joe Mazzulla and that whole outfit, but it's also because they play in the East. The East, you could take a week off. You could take 2 weeks off. I think the Boston Celtics would be the 5 seed if they lost Jaylen Brown in addition to Jason Tatum tomorrow. Like, the East is weak. The West is incredibly strong, and it's getting stronger with San Antonio and Houston and LA adding Luka, and it's not getting easier. So I think that's what you look at moving forward with this Nuggets team without Nikola Jokic. Is just, can they keep afloat? Can they stay? And even if they fall to the 7th seed, how far are they out? Are they within reach of a top 5 seed? Or a top 4 seed? That at least gives you home court in the first round. And then you're going up against the other heavyweights in the conference anyway. You'd like home court, but given the circumstances, it is what it is. Because the idea that the Nuggets can fall to 7th and get back up to 1st in the West, incredibly difficult to do. So it's not good. It's not the worst case scenario with Jokic being out. But it's not great. Nuggets and Sixers tonight. No one for the Denver Nuggets is playing. I think it's their G League roster that's playing the Sixers. More on that in a little bit. And coming up next, more on the Broncos, clinching the number 1 seed and whether there is a flaw in this team that has been exposed over the last 3 weeks. Welcome in hour 2 on this Monday on Extra Sports 1300 and our maiden voyage on 740 KVOR. Appreciate you tuning into the show, and with us being also on KVOR means that if you prefer to watch the show on a daily basis, you could do so on KVOR's social media platforms as well. So if you follow either Extra Sports 1300 or KVOR on Facebook, you'll be able to watch this show also on the Extra Sports 1300 Twitter and YouTube. Or if you follow me on any of those platforms, I won't get into all of them now because it's a lot. Just know that there is another way to consume this show on a daily basis, and that is by watching on social media. Easiest place right now is Facebook. It's on Extra Sports Facebook. It's on KVOR's Facebook. And while you're there, like, subscribe, and most importantly, comment, because this is an interactive experience, or at least I try to make it an interactive experience. If you want to contact the show in the more traditional way, 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show. So 19-3, Broncos get the win that they needed over the Chargers, and now they are the number 1 seed. They will have a bye week. They will have home field advantage. But you are probably happy about that, and why shouldn't you be? But has there been any level of concern over these last 3 games that the Denver Broncos have played? Just this last month of the season, in terms of what may keep the Denver Broncos from ultimately making it to a Super Bowl? Because I think what you have seen with it started with Jacksonville. Kansas City did some of this, and the Chargers did some of this yesterday. And it's about the way they play defense against the Broncos offense. Now, it's a lot of zone coverage. It's a lot of, keeping the top, so to speak, on the defense, not allowing the Broncos to beat the teams over the top. But what it boils down to me as teams have decided and have just been more emboldened in that belief over the last 3 weeks. If we're going to beat the Denver Broncos, we got to make Bo Nix pick us apart. We got to make Bo Nix be a pocket passer that can find spots in the zone and beat us. We're not going to give them the opportunity to kind of bail out, some of these drives that the Broncos offense has where they kind of stall a little bit, and then Sean Payton will dial up a great play design, kind of like the pass to Evan Ingram in the third quarter yesterday. Sean Payton is such a good play designer that he'll be able to hit 1 or 2 of those throughout the game. You're not going to keep him from that. But Bo Nix has been one of the, I don't want to say prolific because the results aren't prolific, but he's top 5 in terms of passes over 20 yards that he's attempted. So that's been a part of the Broncos offense. And I think that a lot of people, including those in the NFL, are a little bit late to catch up to go, oh, they do throw it down the field with Bo Nix. And so you saw Jacksonville take that away, and it was just the normal way they play defense, right? They play zone, and Sean Payton talked about leading into that game his concerns with the zone. Right? You can't rely on one-on-one matchups. Cortland Sutton beating his man or Marvin Mims or any of these receivers, because once they get beat, they just hand them off to another defender. But also the idea of the defense collectively looking at Bo Nix as he's looking at them. You're not turning your back to Bo Nix. You're watching him. You're watching his eyes. You're watching his footwork. You're anticipating where he's going with the football, which then makes Bo Nix's job harder because he has to fake. He has to look you off. He has to throw it quickly in a different direction that you're not anticipating him throwing it to. Those are kind of the two ingredients here that have led to the Broncos offense kind of limping to the finish here. And that was the defense yesterday with the Chargers that had no Khalil Mack and no Derwin James. That's your best pass rusher, and that's your difference maker on the back end that we're sitting the game out. And yet you still had the Broncos having a lot of trouble getting the ball down the field. It's happened enough because Kansas City did it on Christmas, and Sean Payton talked about, and Bo Nix, how that was completely opposite of what they thought the Chiefs were going to do. They thought Kansas City was going to blitz the heck out of Bo Nix. And they said, no, we're going to sit back. And we're going to make Bo Nix be a quarterback. And we're going to force Sean Payton to really get into his bag, so to speak, when it comes to the play design. The way that teams have defended the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix has changed over these last few games because Jacksonville had a tremendous amount of success doing it. And I don't know if Kansas City saw that game and said, let's do that, or they came to that decision on their own. Steve Spagnuolo, obviously being one of the brightest defensive minds in the National Football League, he could come up with an idea like that by himself. But it's hard for me to think that they didn't at least turn on the Jacksonville film and go, hey, this idea that we had, I think it's going to work. Because look at what Jacksonville did. And the Chargers did a little bit more of that. It's, to quote the legendary Chiefs coach Hank Stram, defenses are deciding, let's make the Broncos matriculate the ball down the field. Let's make Bo Nix throw it more. And while he's throwing it more, we're going to be looking right at him to see if he has any tells, if he's giving away where he's going with the football. The Denver Broncos are now being forced to inch their way up the field. And if they have to do that, that increases the probability that Bo Nix at some point will make a mistake with the football. Because it would do that for all quarterbacks, right? This is not me picking on Bo Nix. That would be true of every quarterback. The more you make a quarterback throw, it is reasonable to think that the higher the likelihood that he makes a mistake. But then when you couple it with a quarterback like Bo Nix, the likelihood is even greater. And we saw some of his decisions with the football against Jacksonville. And we saw how difficult it was for the Broncos to move the ball down the field against Kansas City's defense. And now you get a third game with LA, a team that, by the way, the Broncos have had their fair share of issues with in the past, even shorthanded defensively, still being able to hold down the Denver Broncos offense. The only saving grace for the Broncos offense yesterday was the defense's ability to create turnovers. Jaquan McMillan with the pick six was the only offense that the Broncos, and I say offense in quotes, that the Broncos generated for 3/4 of the football game. They even got a strip sack on Trey Lance and couldn't turn it into a touchdown. The Broncos are going to be able to, and Sean Payton talked about this after the game, his comment about not having that extra game. I think this week will be a lot of self-scouting. A lot of Sean Payton and his coaching staff taking a step back and saying, okay, we're getting caught up in the day-to-day, week-to-week thing that the NFL is. We got to get ready for the next opponent. The next opponent, it's happening quickly. We got holidays and all this kind of stuff. Let's take a step back now that we know we're not playing this weekend. And let's look at ourselves. Or perhaps look at what other teams have been doing against us recently. And let's figure out some fixes for that. I don't think that the Broncos have to necessarily know who they're playing next week to do some of this. Because you have 3 teams down the stretch of the season that have all played a similar way defensively. And what's that? Once is an accident, twice, that whole thing. We're now 3 teams in a short period of time all seem to be trying to do the same thing against the Denver Broncos offense. And what Sean Payton and his coaching staff and Davis Webb specifically will now try to do is figure out, okay, what can we do? And Sean Payton talked about this after the Kansas City game on Christmas. He said you have to be more patient with the run game. Essentially, you have to be willing to run the football, even when it's not working. Which should be music to the ears of some Broncos fans, considering the conversations we've had over time about how they don't want to run the football. I don't know that that's a fair perception. I think what it actually does, and it can be a good thing for the Denver Broncos if they do it the right way here, they can lean even more into what their identity is supposed to be. Bo Nix going over the top with 30-yard bombs is not who they're supposed to be. Now, they've shown the ability to do that every once in a while, and whether it's every once in a while in a game or every once in a while during the season, once every 3 or 4 games. But now teams are taking that away. And teams are saying, we don't believe that Bo Nix can orchestrate a 70, 75, 80, 85-yard drive against us. Dinking and dunking. Because it's one thing to dink and dunk when everyone's playing man coverage. That's how space opens up. Right? You send receivers deep down the field, they take some of the defense, and then you have all this open space. When teams are playing zone defense against you, you don't have that ability. You don't have that space. Teams are essentially saying, we don't believe, or at least our best path to win is for us to put it on Bo Nix to quarterback his way out of games. Like true pocket passer quarterbacking. That's what teams, I think, are going to do, regardless of who the team is that the Broncos face in a couple of weeks. And Broncos got to figure out their counters to it. And I think you saw one yesterday. It's Bo Nix's legs. Here we are, the season coming back full circle. We're talking about how Bo Nix needs to run the ball more. At times, that was the only positive plays that the Broncos had, was Bo Nix running the football. Even though teams are saying, hey, Bo Nix beat us 3 to 5 yards a pass at a time, you can beat them that way if you're able to, but also running them out of it. Right? That's why Sean Payton said after the Kansas City game, you got to be more patient with the run game. got to try and run them out of it. And Bo Nix can give you that with his legs. You don't want to go too far. But it's something that Bo Nix has that not everybody in this AFC playoff field has. And you saw the success rate that they had when Bo Nix was running the football. I think that might be one of their answers to this. But it sure seems like word has gotten around the NFL on how you stop this Broncos offense. And Jacksonville's been successful, Kansas City's been successful, and the Chargers, all told yesterday, were quite successful. So this is a homework assignment for the Denver Broncos as they're sitting on the couch with this bye week. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Broncos clinching home field advantage. Let's ask the big question today. In fact, it's on our social media, whether it's KVOR or Extra Sports 1300. Broncos got the 1 seed. They got home field. Is their next road game going to be in the Super Bowl? Kind of take the temperature a little bit after the regular season comes to an end. And the regular season, speaking of, came to an end in spectacular fashion last night. What a game. Got to talk about that next. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports on Extra Sports 1300 and now on 740 KVOR. Regardless of which station you are listening on, you could text or call into the show at 719-247-1313. Kyle checking in. And Kyle, I wish that you had tuned in at the beginning of the show, because what you are texting in about is exactly what I started this show by talking about. And I will revisit this coming up. But to get to Kyle's text, I'm all about dissecting the Broncos offense over the next 2 weeks. However, we talking about how the Broncos didn't have what it takes. 14 wins with the same struggles says otherwise. Let's discuss how amazing this is to exceed expectations, how the defense and offense play complementary football. 1 win, Broncos in the AFC Championship. How about that? You said that. I said that. That's what I started the show with. So, and look, it's valid. I'm just saying there was a game yesterday to react to. That was my reaction. But it is, and to your point, Kyle, they have overcome it. They won 2 of the 3 games in question. Now, this is where the but who have they beat crowd comes out of the woodwork. But they won 2 of those 3 games, and that's the good thing here. If you're a Broncos fan, you have to see what I see, Kyle. But it's better to be trying to figure this all out as the number 1 seed with home field and not having a game to prep for this weekend. That's another reason why the Denver Broncos getting the number 1 seed is so vitally important, I thought. I've been saying this for a month, that the Broncos have to get the number 1 seed. This is part of it. I think their defense has shown some signs against better competition of starting to wear down a little bit. I don't think the last 2 weeks are a great gauge when it's Trey Lance and Chris Oladokun that you're going up against to gauge whether the Broncos defense is quote unquote back. But culminating with the Jacksonville game, they were on a trend where they were wearing down, I thought. So they need the bye week for that reason. And now here's another reason why having the bye week is necessary, to do a little self-scout, to be able to try and figure out if the team they end up playing in 2 weeks decides to take a page out of the book of the Chargers and the Chiefs and the Jaguars and says, yeah, let's do some of that. The Broncos know what they're going to do against it. And I already pointed out one way, Bo Nix using his legs. It's not to say that the answers can't be found. Maybe they're more difficult to find when you're in the midst of prepping for the next game, and now with a few days for Sean Payton and his coaches to get together, that's when they can figure some stuff out before they start doing some advanced scouting on team they might play. To that end, by the way, we can get into this as the week goes along. Who do you think the Broncos are going to play? If everything goes chalk this weekend and Monday, it's the Steelers coming to Mile High in the divisional round. I don't think it will be chalk. I think that the Denver Broncos are going to play one of the following 3 teams. And I haven't landed on who I think it will be yet. I kind of think it's Buffalo. As much as I like Jacksonville, I think Buffalo, they would be, and I think I maybe lean Texans at this point, but I think Buffalo might end up being the lowest remaining seed. But I don't put it out of the realm of possibility that it could be a rematch with the Chargers. And that's another point Kyle brought up. I think both teams were kind of pulling punches a little bit. I think there was some of that. But that's why I say, but look at the Kansas City game, look at the Jacksonville game. It's more than just yesterday. But could the Chargers be the team that the Broncos play next? I mean, it won't be Jacksonville and it won't be New England. Take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. All good, Kyle. Kyle's like, I messed up not listening to the show. No, I messed up not talking about what you wanted to talk about right as you tuned in, Kyle. So that's on me. Appreciate you tuning in, by the way. Let's talk about that game last night. I know this has no impact on the Denver Broncos, although the Steelers or the Texans could be the Broncos' next opponent. And that matchup got decided last night. Just how wild was that game last night? So for most of it, I guess the Steelers, they put some points on the board. Lamar threw the interception. The Steelers were kind of coming around in that third quarter, and maybe they would have continued to do so. But I thought for 2.5 quarters, it was a very AFC North-like game. Kind of a rock fight between two teams that you're like, in a meritocracy, would either of these teams be truly worthy of being playoff teams? No, but we have the divisional thing. And then all of a sudden, the game just opened up, and it was spectacular. I mean, I can't think of a better way to close out the season than what the Steelers and the Ravens did last night. So it starts with, the Steelers take a 13-10 lead. Okay, they got the better of the Ravens in the third quarter. Fourth quarter, Lamar Jackson over the top, wide open, Zay Flowers, 50 yards, touchdown, boom, 17-13 Pittsburgh. And I'll just be 100% honest. I thought that was it. I thought that was it for the Steelers. And then Aaron Rodgers comes back, leads the Steelers down the field. Kenneth Gainwell, after all of those issues with the communication between Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith, the headset wasn't working or something, and they had to burn 2 timeouts, and you're like, that's just, they're just digging a deeper grave. Like, now they're not going to have these timeouts. But they end up scoring. So they're back on top 20-17. And it's like, all right, maybe the Steelers have a chance. And then the very next drive, Lamar Jackson, in a play indistinguishable from the last one he hit Zay Flowers on, hits Zay Flowers for 64 yards. And I'm like, oh, Steelers are definitely done now. That it has to be a wrap. Twice, Lamar hits them for that pass, and Zay Flowers, Chris Collinsworth said it during the broadcast. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody wide open, that wide open. And it's like, okay, Steelers are done. Oh, no, they weren't. Ensuing drive by the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Rodgers gets the snap. He's back to pass. Looking left. Going deep left. Man wide open. It's caught. Touchdown Pittsburgh. Touchdown Steelers. Calvin Austin wide open down the left side. A 26-yard touchdown. And with 55 seconds to go, Pittsburgh has taken the lead.
Amazing. Steelers score less than a minute to go. And at worst, you're thinking, okay, maybe the Ravens go down the field and kick a field goal, but that would only tie the game. So unless there's another, systematic breakdown of the Steelers' back end of their defense and Zay Flowers has a 75-yard touchdown catch, we're at worst going to overtime. Because Chris Boswell's coming out. I'm going and getting a beverage from my fridge because Chris Boswell hasn't missed an extra point in 4 years. And then this happens.
Boswell for another big PAT. His kick is up. It is no good. He missed it wide right.
Guess what I said at that point? Steelers are done. Steelers are done. For the most reliable, and the Steelers have a lot of flaws. Chris Boswell is not one of them. He's been their most reliable player, arguably, these many years. Although I do seem to remember a time where Mike Tomlin always went for 2 because he didn't trust him kicking extra points. Ray Dominguez, who's producing today, can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But Chris Boswell has been automatic. 4 years. He's gone without missing an extra point. And he misses one there, and we're back to the Steelers are done. Steelers are done. And they're really done after this.
Here's the snap. Blitz coming. Jackson looking. Throws down the field. Got Likely open, and he makes a leaping catch inside the 25. Isaiah Likely climbs the ladder, snatches it down at the Pittsburgh 22. Timeout with 12 seconds to go. What a catch by Likely.
So it's like before you're thinking, oh, the Ravens, they got to get around the 30, 35 maybe they're going to inch down the field and just get right into that range, kick a field goal, be over. Nope, went over the top, Likely with the catch, and it's like they might score a touchdown to win the game. Now, they weren't going to do that because they were just going to control the clock after that, but you're like, now this is a chip shot. It's over. Steelers are done. Mike Tomlin's fired. Aaron Rodgers does whatever the opposite of riding off into the sunset is. And then this guy steps up, Tyler Loop. Again, a very good season. But last night, man, whatever that was, it came for everyone.
This will be a 44-yard attempt. It will come from the middle of the field. It's for the division. Loop is ready. Here's the snap, the spot. The kick is on the way. It is no good. He missed it. It's wide to the right. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have won the division. The Steelers are going to the playoffs.
All of those clips courtesy of Westwood One, and you heard it, on regardless of what station you're listening to this show on, it was on KVOR and Extra Sports last night. Just an insane way to close out what has been, especially on the AFC side. I thought that the Broncos, the way they beat the Chargers yesterday, was fitting. It was a fitting way for them to clinch the number 1 seed. The AFC, which nobody has what this is right now. Broncos 1, Patriots 2, Jaguars 3, Chiefs out, Ravens out. No one had this. And even as of a month and a half ago, you thought that the Colts were shoo-ins to be in the playoffs. For a year that has been absolutely upside down in the American Football Conference, can you think of a better way to close out the season than its last playoff spot being decided in a game that was absolutely drunk, like last night's was? Completely unhinged, completely chaotic and wild. I'm not sure either team is that good, but someone had to get the last playoff spot, and just insanity. Pure straight chaos. Just absolutely a perfect way to end not only this particular NFL season, but especially on the AFC side where everything that's up is down, everything's black, that's white. It's been nuts. But the Steelers are in. And if everything is chalk, Aaron Rodgers and the boys will be visiting Empower Field in a couple weeks' time. Today, a day for the Steelers and the Broncos to be celebrating and other organizations to be making heads roll. It is Black Monday, the latest next. So a lot of NFL fan bases not having quite as good of a day as Broncos fans are. Although, depending on what fan base you ask, this could actually be a good day. Today around the National Football League is affectionately referred to as Black Monday, the day where all the teams that failed this season hold their head coach accountable. And there are now 6 openings in the NFL. And I want to talk about all of them or just look at them as a group, but I really want to single one out. The Vegas Raiders completely botched this. And I'm not saying firing Pete Carroll. I'm saying the whole thing. This entire idea that the Raiders had. We're going to bring in Pete Carroll, right? And we're going to, in a division with Reed and Harbaugh and Peyton, we're bringing our own coaching heavyweight to the table. And we're going to make the AFC West the best coached division in the National Football League. And what we are going to task Pete Carroll with is building a culture. Right? He's going to build a culture of winning. And it's not just going to be with him on the practice field or the way he coaches up the players, but it will also be because we'll win. Not winning the division. The expectations were not that lofty in Vegas. But what the Raiders were supposed to be is kind of this veteran-led, plucky, well-coached team that they're going to win some games that you're like, really? The Raiders won that game? You're going to play spoiler. The Raiders, in effect, were not tanking this year. Right? They weren't worried about their draft pick. They were saying, we want to instill a culture of winning, and we're going to get the winningest coach that we could possibly find. And Pete Carroll was never long for that job. In fact, I think either way today, Pete Carroll was going to be done as the Raiders coach. I think Pete Carroll came in almost on an interim basis for 1 year to just, and maybe if it wasn't completely turned in the right direction, they'd say, all right, Pete, can you hang around one more year to kind of push us more in the right direction? But I think the plan was instant morale or instant culture boost, right? Teach them how to win, show them how to win. And we're going to go with Geno Smith and Max Crosby, and we're going to win more games than people think we are. And we're going to show our younger players what it takes to win. And we're going to bring a winning culture back to the Raiders franchise. And then, you know what? We know we won't have as good of a draft pick, but, we'll maybe get aggressive with some trades. We'll figure some things out. But we want to instill a culture of winning. They have the number 1 pick in the draft. This plan blew up in their face so spectacularly. I mean, they drafted Ashton Genty with this in mind, because who in their right mind that is 3 to maybe 5 years away from being relevant takes a running back in the first round? History would tell you that Ashton Genty's best years will be behind him by the time that a 3-year rebuild is completed in Vegas, let alone if it takes 5. But why did they draft Ashton Genty? They drafted Ashton Genty because if we have a good running game with Geno Smith, we can win some games. And they started to. They beat New England. And that actually came back to hurt New England. The reason why the Broncos are the number 1 seed and not the New England Patriots is because the Patriots lost to the Raiders. So in the end, I suppose that the Raiders did some of what they were trying to do. They did it that one time, but they didn't. And yesterday's game means nothing. In fact, I'll say this as a Chiefs fan, I'm glad that the Raiders won yesterday. I'm happy about it. Chiefs haven't had a draft pick this good in a decade and aren't going to have one for another decade after this. I want the worst draft pick possible. So, like, the whole plan was you want us to tear down and rebuild and start over and tank and all this kind of stuff. No, we're going to install winning culture. We're going to try to win football games. We're bringing in Chip Kelly to coordinate an offense. He's a genius. Geno Smith won a bunch of games in Seattle. This is going to work. Pete Carroll, and they're the number 1 pick. And they almost screwed it up. And now they look at it and they're a year behind where they could have been. Right? They're a year behind where they could have been if they just would have looked at themselves in the mirror and said, we have an opportunity to zig while everyone is zagging. Chiefs are the Chiefs. Chargers are going after the Chiefs. Broncos are going after the Chiefs. Let's go the other way. Let's rebuild. Let's start the rebuild, because what's going to happen is the Chiefs are going to start to fall. And the Broncos will have to eventually play Bo Nix, which is going to strip them of a lot of their talent. And the Chargers, over time are going to lose some of their best players, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Keenan Allen, etc. And we're going to position ourselves to where we're ready to rock. When everyone else is falling, we're rising. And now they're still going down that path just a year later. And they're having to look for a new head coach. And they have nothing gained from last year, except they're looking at Ashton Genty like, I mean, what are we going to do with what are we going to do in 3 years when we might be on the way to being good and Ashton Genty is all used up, as many running backs are this day and age? So there are a lot of failed experiments around the league that are getting a spotlight cast on them with Black Monday, but that's one that deserves its own recognition. The Raiders had a clear plan, and in pure Raider fashion, it did not work at all. And now they're starting from square one. 5 other jobs are open. Not all of them just today. Obviously, the Titans and the Giants, we knew they would have openings. So all in all, pretty quiet. I mean, four firings today, but I wonder if there's more coming. There's a couple of NFL teams that the way their seasons ended, I wonder if they want to take a beat and really think it through, but I think ultimately there may be a couple of other jobs that come open by the end of the week. I'll tell you what those are coming up in a little bit. We'll hit the 3 stories that are driving the show, but in the meantime, guys, ladies, in today's world of AI and filters, what's real anymore? Your health is real. And so are the experts at Synergenics and Low T Center. If you've been feeling tired, unfocused, or maybe just a little bit off, it could be for you guys low testosterone. And at Synergenics and Low T Center, you meet with a real provider, not a chatbot, and get real medication, never compounded hormones like other places have. And right now, for a limited time, the men's TRT test is free. And ladies, if you want to take a hormone test, you can. And yours is just $90. Normally $299. It's $200 savings, I think. Math is never my strong suit. Plus weight loss consultations, if that's your health journey, those are free at Synergenics and Low T Center. You could just walk in today, or if you want to be buttoned up, you could book your appointment at getmyhealthfix.com. That's getmyhealthfix.com. Real experts, real results. That is Synergenics and Low T Center. Back after this. Hello there. Welcome in hour 3 on this Monday. Glad to have you. Appreciate you tuning in on Extra Sports 1300, the Extra Sports 1300 app or extrasports1300.com. And now in all of those different places on 740 KVOR, the radio, online at KVOR.com, and the KVOR app. For those of you who listen to KVOR regularly, this would normally be when you would hear Mark Levin. You will hear him right after me on a daily basis. So Mark Levin has gone nowhere. He will still be on at 740 KVOR. But we're changing things up around here and giving you more chances to engage at a local level, whether it's with news, with politics, or with sports. We're certainly not the first radio station to do something like this. In fact, there's a very big one just to the north of us that does this, and are excited about it. Really excited about it. Excited to hear from you at 719-247-1313. Weigh in, use that passion that you bring to other shows on 740 KVOR to this show. And if you are a regular listener of Extra Sports 1300 and you're listening, keep up your level of passion. No notes. Bring that here. Hoping to grow our community here on the airwaves. So again, 719-247-1313 is the text and the phone line. You could do either and be a part of this show. And one thing that we do around this time every day is kind of hit the big stories of the day, and we call them What's Driving the Show. All right, and we begin with the Broncos clinching everything yesterday.
And lands from the pocket, gets picked off the deflection, and here we go with the run back inside the 20. McMillan is in for the touchdown.
CBS on the call, the Denver Broncos. It wasn't pretty, but they got it done. 19-3 was the final over the LA Chargers, and the road to the Super Bowl runs through Denver as they are the number 1 seed. And even though yesterday was not quite the party that last year's Week 18 was, where the Broncos just absolutely eviscerated the Kansas City Chiefs to clinch their first playoff spot in a better part of a decade, it was somewhat fitting. Like maybe you just want to sit on the couch and let the inevitable play out and not have to worry about it too much. But that's not who this Broncos team is it? They have won 11 games. Actually, by this year's Broncos standards, yesterday was a walk in the park. They set an NFL record this season by winning 11 games decided by one score. This team has repeatedly and constantly made you sweat, made you be on the edge of your seat, made you maybe doubt them on occasion, more than one occasion. But ultimately, they got it done. And ultimately, this team has accomplished every goal that they have set out to accomplish. To use something that Sean Payton has said, they'll play in bigger games. There are bigger prizes to play for. But the Denver Broncos won the division. They got the number 1 seed. They have home field. The way that they play, as excruciating at times as it might be, worrying whether this is the week that the Denver Broncos, it will all fall apart. They just keep getting it done. And to me, there's a lot of people to credit. You have to start with Sean Payton. You have to. Because this whole season, and it feels a little manufactured by Sean Payton, doesn't it? Like, how many times have you heard Sean Payton talk about the record of a team playing back-to-back road games after coming back from London when the temperature is below 47 degrees? Like, the guy would find every little detail, every little variable, and try to minimize it. And what you had with the Denver Broncos, although for the first 3 quarters and in many games this season, they've had their troubles. But ultimately, when the game is on the line, when it is close, the Broncos are the more disciplined team. They are the team that is not making the huge mistake. They are more sound in special teams. They are more sound on defense. Sean Payton, his plan was to minimize all of these variables that pop up for a number of teams throughout the season that keep them from winning games. He said, I'm going to get my team to eliminate those, so it's just between me and my counterpart on the other sideline. And I'm going to win that battle more often than not. And out of the 17 times that Sean Payton was across from another head coach, 14 times Sean Payton won. You want a boiled down synopsis of the Broncos season? Sean Payton being better than his counterpart on the other sideline. That's why the Broncos are where they are. And what's remarkable about it is that this team is at some positions not as strong as some of their peers. Just look at the quarterback position, for instance. Rank the 7 AFC quarterbacks and tell me if Bo Nix is any higher than 6th. But yet, here the Broncos are with the number 1 seed. Broncos are also one of the younger teams in the National Football League. Last year, getting to that one game in Buffalo was the only playoff experience 90% of the roster had. This is still a very young team. So not only did the vision worked with a roster that it probably shouldn't have worked with. This Broncos team is so far ahead of schedule with a second-year quarterback, with the amount of young players that they have and how little playoff experience they have. Sean Payton got them to minimize all these other variables to where even when the game is in the balance, and it could go either way, that proverbial ball or literal ball doesn't bounce the other way. 14 times this year, 11 of them in one-score games, the ball has bounced the Broncos' way. In a year where there isn't as much chaos as there is right now and as many new teams popping up here, Sean Payton would win Coach of the Year. He certainly has a Coach of the Year season. But there are a lot of people, especially look at the NFC. Mike McDonald, Kyle Shanahan, Ben Johnson. Like, the competition for Coach of the Year it's a crowded field. And Sean Payton will not ultimately win because this is a team that did, for everything I just said, they did make the playoffs last year. But for them to take a step, and it's not a step, it's a leap. It's a leap to go from, hey, we're the last team in, happy to be here, to now the playoffs run through us. It's a jump. It's a leap that the Denver Broncos have taken. And the guy that deserves more credit than anybody else is Sean Payton. And when you're deciding who you're going with, who you're going to be backing in what is a wide open AFC, if coaching matters to you, or if that is the most important thing to you, if that makes the difference, I look at Sean Payton before I'd look at anybody else in this AFC playoff field. The road to the Super Bowl will go through Denver after their 19-3 win over the LA Chargers. Here is story number 2. An old friend with a measure of revenge against the Denver Nuggets yesterday.
We had enough good players to where we could create a good shot in a different way. I didn't need to come off of a screen and be high usage in that way and shoot some of the tougher shots that I'm shooting here, which I can make. But over there, those may not be considered the most highest percentage compared to what we could get. So that's with every good team. But it is good, to be able to kind of show what I'm capable of and kind of get some of the recognition.
Yesterday, you were treated to, you ever run into an ex and you say to yourself, you don't say it out loud, you certainly don't say it to your new partner, but in your head, you're like, man, they look good. It's Michael Porter with the Denver Nuggets. And yesterday they got a front row seat to Michael Porter Jr. Unleashed. He scores 27 points yesterday, grabs 11 rebounds and dishes out 5 assists as the Brooklyn Nets beat the Denver Nuggets 127-115, and it wasn't just Michael Porter, for one game having an out-of-body experience because he was playing the Nuggets. This has been Michael Porter this whole time. This whole year, he has had by far his best season in the NBA. His numbers are dwarfing anything he did in Denver. But what may accompany you seeing your ex and how good they look, saying, man, maybe I messed up. If you're a Nuggets fan, don't think that. Don't let that thought enter your head. Because Michael Porter is certainly better off without you. You're okay without him. Right? In fact, with the rash of injuries that the Denver Nuggets have had, it's almost like it doesn't matter how many trades or how much depth the Denver Nuggets have. It doesn't seem to be enough. But could you imagine where they would be right now? Oh, you can. Where they are right now. But there was a time earlier this season where you had Cam Johnson on the floor and you had Jonas Valanciunas and you had Tim Hardaway. All of these guys, it's not just who you got in return for Michael Porter. It's the flexibility financially that allowed you to get Jonas Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway. That until all of this stuff happened with Jokic and Valanciunas, and now Tim Hardaway's not playing tonight, and Aaron Gordon got hurt, and now he's back, but he's not playing tonight. My point is, you saw, it's unfortunate the timing that the Denver Nuggets, who are so severely undermanned, would not be able to put up their best effort against Michael Porter Jr. to say, we're not doing so bad ourselves. But grand scheme of things, you saw it right before the holidays. This Denver Nuggets team is better off having made the Michael Porter deal. And in a rare thing that never happens in the NBA, both teams won. Both teams got out of the trade what they were looking for. And now Michael Porter is in a place with Brooklyn where he can take all the shots he wants. He can fully show the potential that he has as a player. I'm genuinely happy for the guy. It was a tough spot to be in. And Cam Johnson has found that out firsthand. How difficult of a role Michael Porter had. The fourth option offensively. To be boxed in. You got to do this and you got to do this, but don't do this. We need you to just do this. I know you're capable of more, but you got to do this. It's a tough role that Michael Porter held in Denver. And I thought he played in that role as well as the Nuggets could have hoped, and he helped them win the championship. And now Michael Porter gets to go on to Brooklyn, and he gets to take all the shots he wants. He's the guy there. And he seems like he's living his best life. But even though the Nuggets right now are dealing with a slew of injuries, I think they are in a better spot having made the Michael Porter trade as well. You just wish everyone would have been healthy yesterday when the Nuggets went in to the Barclays Center. Speaking of injured players, not Michael Porter, but I was talking about Nuggets severely shorthanded. Here is story number 3. Panthers television on the call. The Avs, for just the 3rd time this season, lost a game within 3 periods. In regulation, they fell to Florida 2-1. And I know what you're thinking, Ryan, what does that have to do with injured players? Because the bigger story of that game is that Gabriel Landeskog basically blew a tire on a breakaway yesterday and crashed into the boards, and now he's going to be out for a period of time. We don't know how long. Sometime. This is one night after Devon Taves crashed into the boards, and Jared Bednar said he'd be out for some time, and this is only both after Mackenzie Blackwood was placed on IR. Now, the perspective that you can have if you're an Avs fan, just look at the Denver Nuggets. The Avs will be okay. The Avs will be fine. They have Scott Wedgwood. They have Cale Makar. They have Valerian Nichushkin. They have plenty of other players that can step up in the absences of Blackwood and Taves and Landeskog. And as long as these aren't season-ending, super long-term injuries, it'll be fine. And it's only 3 compared to the Nuggets, who have like 8 guys hurt right now. So I am not here to fan the flames of panic if you're an Avalanche fan. It's a bummer, especially for Gabriel Landeskog, given that he had such a tremendous season and how he's defying expectations and defying the odds of how many games he could play, and then he blows a tire and he's out. Like, how's that for a cruel world? Avs will be okay. Avs can maintain. But bummer yesterday with the 2-1 loss to Florida, just their 3rd regulation loss, and then losing Gabriel Landeskog, joining Mackenzie Blackwood and Devon Taves on the show. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, Black Monday across the NFL. 6 openings. Could Vance Joseph be leaving the Broncos for any one of them? That's next. You're on both Extra Sports 1300 and now proudly on 740 KPR as well. 719-247-1313 is the number if you're joining us on KVOR. Commit that number to memory or save it in your phone because that technology exists in the year 2025. And then make sure you text or call into the show to give your thoughts or to ask questions or anything pertaining to the day's topics. To wit, Rich is on the line and wants to talk about Gabriel Landeskog. Rich, fire away. Glad to have you.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I get a twofer apparently with Cale Makar as well. But Gabe, well, as you call him, Gabriel Landeskog, I'm seriously concerned about whether this is an injury to the leg and knee that he damaged so bad. And it was just, I wouldn't say a miracle, but nobody expected it to come back, much less to play this well. Injury, same location?
It is not. I am happy to report if there is a silver lining in him being out, it is that this is an upper body injury. So while it was a blown tire that ultimately took him out, it was the collision with both the Panthers net and then the end boards that injured him. So it is not a re-aggravation of the injury that he worked so hard to come back from.
Well, and I want to ask real quickly, if I can, about the Olympics. I know a lot of the Avs players are not American. We've got all kinds of nationalities, but do you think it'll have any impact on the Avs in the long run?
No. I think that, in fact, part of why the Avs are playing at the level they're playing at now is because that Olympic carrot is being dangled in front of them. We saw Brock Nelson get, what a cool moment for Brock Nelson, third generation Olympian now. All the players who are representing their countries, even Scott Wedgwood, we were talking about him potentially representing Canada. That didn't happen. I think that the Olympics has actually been a positive thing for the Colorado Avalanche. But yes, I would avert your eyes coming out of the Olympic break. It might be a little bit ugly, but I think ultimately the Olympics is a good thing for the Colorado Avalanche.
And I want to say, I really appreciate you being on 740. I normally listen on my phone on the app. I just got in the car, turned the radio on, and boom, it's always, I think I was super glued to 740 KBOR. Great being able to listen to you in the car. And
I would imagine that it is on KVOR in the mornings as well. Would it not be?
It would be, because I'm listening to Jim Arthur and Sean and everyone else as I'm getting ready for an 8 to 10 o'clock job that I have.
Right, that 8 to 10 o'clock job. I hear you're very popular at your 8 to 10 job.
Well, you're very popular at yours. It is great. I swear to God, it is so good having you. I'm so excited. I'll let you get back to everybody else. I just wanted to say hi, welcome aboard. And I truly do enjoy listening, because I don't have a lot of time to watch all the sports. But just listening today, I've gotten caught up on a lot of things that I never, ever would have known. So when I jump on the bandwagon, I'll sound knowledgeable.
You are a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk tomorrow.
We'll talk tomorrow.
That is the incomparable Richard Randall. How long did you, KVR listeners, how long did it take you? Like 3 seconds to pick out that was Richard? No, I very much appreciate the kind words from Richard, because I know, what we're doing here, it's a little unorthodox, but, to have a vote of confidence and to have somebody like Richard, say that this would be a good thing for him and the way he consumes radio, that means everything. So great to have Richard, and make sure you tune in and listen to Richard weekdays, 8 to 10 a.m. on 740 KVOR. Black Monday in the NFL, there are 6 openings. 2 we already knew of, because the Titans and the Giants decided to put the now hiring sign up a little bit earlier than everyone else. But joining Brian Callahan, the head coach of the Titans, or former head coach of the Titans, and Brian Dable from the Giants on the unemployment line. Pete Carroll, I mentioned earlier, what a disaster for the Raiders. This was not the way it was supposed to go. They were supposed to win more games than this. They were not supposed to have the number one pick. They were supposed to have a winning culture instilled. And now they're just a year behind what was inevitable, that they had to tear this thing down and rebuild. And meanwhile, you're messing around with you're angering your franchise player, Max Crosby, by deactivating him late in the season. So what a mess with the Raiders. But Pete Carroll is out. Jonathan Gannon is out in Arizona. I would say that is more of a Kyler Murray problem in Arizona than a Jonathan Gannon problem, but that's my read on it from the outside. Easier to get rid of Jonathan Gannon than Kyler Murray, though. Kevin Stefanski, maybe the least surprising. I don't know. Browns fans, Browns backers, let me know. Is there any part of you that's actually surprised that Kevin Stefanski got fired? I thought it was going to happen. My only surprise is that Andrew Berry has stuck around. How are they not doing with it what Atlanta did today, which is say, new head coach, new GM. We're cleaning house. How is that not the case? That makes no sense. And if you're a Browns fan that were ready to celebrate, you know, a regime change, the fact that Andrew Berry still is there. In fact, I think I know Browns fans well enough. I think you would be, if you're a Shador fan, you want Kevin Stefanski gone. If you're a Browns fan, I think that you wanted to keep Stefanski and lose Andrew Berry. Is that a fair assessment? And if you could lose, if it was a cleaning of the house from Jimmy Haslam, and you wish, obviously, that Jimmy Haslam would just fire himself as well. But if it was both Berry and Stefanski out, you'd be happy. Yes? Just Berry out, also happy. Only Stefanski out, I'd be curious your thoughts. Because I think Stefanski is the Mike Vrabel, he's going to get hired immediately guy. I think Stefanski's a bright dude. I think he's a good coach, and I think he did handle Shador correctly. As much as people want to say otherwise. Maybe he's not the biggest supporter of Shador. But waiting and slow playing Shador's emergence as the starter, I think was the right call. He was not as ready as Dylan Gabriel. Doesn't mean Dylan Gabriel's better than Shador. So Stefanski's going to get hired immediately. He's a South Philly guy. Would he go to New York? Maybe, but Stefanski's out. Titans and Giants were already open. And then I mentioned the Falcons cleaned house, firing both Raheem Morris. Sorry, Broncos fans. Didn't mean to bring up that guy. Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot, which is interesting. And what's also interesting about it, and I guess I don't blame them, given the results, the Falcons in many ways, they were the antithesis of the Broncos. Like Broncos were the team that if it was a 50-50 proposition, close game late, you felt like Broncos were going to get it done. The Falcons, you had no confidence were going to get it done. Ironically, except for yesterday, when the Buccaneers could have really used them to have failed. You know, remember Terry Fontenot was on the short list of candidates for the Broncos general manager job before they hired George Paton. And George Paton has gone on to And I know he's had Sean Payton over his shoulder this whole time, but he's drafted Nick Bonito. He drafted Bo Nix, drafted Marvin Mims, signed Dre Greenlaw, signed Talanoa Hufanga, McGlinchey, Powers. Like, all of these guys go on George Payton's ledger. And meanwhile, Terry Fontenot decided to sign Kirk Cousins to a $200+ million contract coming off of an ACL tear, and then immediately go out and draft his successor, Michael Penix. Shocking that did not work in Atlanta. There are a couple of jobs that I am not ready to say are not going to be open. Are we sure that Todd Bowles is going to survive in Tampa? That division was there for the taking. Tampa on paper was easily the best team. I know they dealt with injuries, but late in the season, they got back Mike Evans, they got back Tristan Wirfs, and yet they still faltered down the stretch. Yes, they beat Carolina, but they had themselves in a position where the Falcons, being the Saints, would knock them out of the playoffs. And even if they would have gotten in, look at the record. In that division, the one bad division in the NFC, Tampa couldn't win that division outright. And I go back to what Todd Bowles said after they blew it. Who are they playing? Was that the other Panthers game where he went on a tirade and started dropping F-bombs, started cussing, something that he didn't. And I said at that time, either it's going to galvanize this team or it means he's completely lost the team. I think it ended up being the latter. So hang tight on Tampa. I'm not ready to say that Todd Bowles is safe, although I haven't seen anything out of Tampa. Maybe they did give him a vote of confidence. And then after last night, is John Harbaugh safe in Baltimore? And there's a bigger picture in Baltimore where they might have a new head coach and a new quarterback sooner rather than later. But those are two jobs that maybe they've come out and said those guys are safe. I just haven't seen it. But I'd be watching over the coming days, Baltimore and Tampa. I think the organizations have so much respect for those head coaches that they're not going to just throw them out on the unemployment line at the same time that all of these bad teams do. But it's hard for me to think that Tampa or Baltimore is going to go any further with Todd Bowles and John Harbaugh, respectively, as their head coaches. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Coming up at the top of the hour on Extra Sports 1300, it will be the Denver Nuggets taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. And how's this for irony? Joel Embiid is probable, and Nikola Jokic is out. On Philadelphia Sports Talk Radio all over the day today, is Jokic ducking Embiid? Not saying that they understand nuance or have self-awareness, but I wouldn't be shocked if somebody in the Philadelphia either fan base or media landscape threw out the idea of, oh, how's this? Joel Embiid's going to play, Nikola Jokic isn't. May as well take back all the nasty things Denver fans said about Joel Embiid ducking Jokic. First of all, I don't care what the injury report says. I'll believe Joel Embiid is playing when he steps onto the court for the jump ball. And then I'm keeping track of his minutes and making sure he plays more than 15. Nuggets have everybody out. I mean, this is a terrible way to promote the broadcast, and I encourage you to listen by all means, but everybody is out. Just everybody. Like, Ryan, who's out? Everybody. Go ahead, name a Nuggets player. They're out. Jokic, out. Cam Johnson, out. Aaron Gordon, out. Christian Brown, out. Jamal Murray's out. Jonas Valanciunas is out. I'm serious. All of those guys are out. They are absolutely punting on this basketball game. And yet, I just want to get this on the record before I end the show today. Watch the Denver Nuggets win tonight. Watch it like a remember Magnificent Seven a few years ago? Nuggets were down to 7 players. They go in to Utah. Somehow get a win. I think they beat the Bucks a couple nights after that too. I'm not guaranteeing that it's going to happen. I'm just saying don't be shocked if the Denver Nuggets actually end up winning this game. Oh, Tim Hardaway Jr. also out. Also out. So that's coming up at the top of the hour on Extra Sports 1300. On 740 KVOR, it will be Mark Levin, which it will be every weekday following this show. So Mark Levin didn't go anywhere. Still here on 740 KVOR, or here, or on 740 KVOR. I guess here's Extra Sports 1300 and KVOR. I'll get used to it. You'll get used to it. We'll work out the bugs. This will be good. I'm excited for this, legitimately. And getting interaction the way I have, both on and off the air today, tells me that we may be on to something here. This coming in via X at NorthJR79 or 79 on X says, we don't have one too many games in the NFL, which is something I asserted earlier because I was watching the NFL this weekend. I'm like, it's not even that this could have all been an email. This didn't even need to exist. This didn't need to be communicated. We didn't need to have the Broncos play the Chargers. What purpose did that game yesterday serve? Other than sowing more seeds of doubt, perhaps. Because this offense couldn't put the ball in the end zone. As fun as last night was between the Ravens and the Steelers, we ended up with the same division leader that we had going into this week. So you have a Myles Garrett sack record, which is going to be scrutinized because he had one more game to do it than Strahan did, or TJ Watt did. Sorry, I'm losing track of all the. Is the sack number record going to be like the home run number? Not for the reasons that you think. We're not talking Barry Bonds here, but I'm just saying, Are we getting to the point, and the Denver Broncos are a great example of this? They sacked the quarterback so many times this year. The most that they ever have in the history of their franchise. They were just short of an NFL record for sacks. But that's the best team at sacking the quarterback. But how many other teams are very good at it? So are we going to, as much as this, it was Strahan for a long time, and now it's changed hands a couple of times in fairly recent history. Is this going to be a thing now? Is the number going to go up and up and up and up? And are we just going to keep seeing this record changing hands? But for now, it will be looked at with a little bit of a side eye, given that Garrett needed 17 games to get it. But so his sack record, Keenan Allen's bonus, and the NFC South. Am I missing anything? Was that the only things that we couldn't have decided in 17 weeks, that we had to go 18 weeks? Steelers still the AFC North champions. Broncos had the tiebreaker, had the number 1 seed before Sunday. So anyway, I think that the season is one game too long. At North JR79 on X says, oh, no, Ryan. We need to go the other way. We need a 20-game season. No exhibition or preseason games. Start the season in August. Give each team 2 bye weeks. Nobody wants to watch 10 months of boring NBA games. Let's do it. Now, I would stick up for the NBA, but I understand that you are definitely speaking for a lot of people, so I'm not going to push back too hard against that notion. I think in a sport that is as violent, and I get what you're saying, you basically take the preseason games and replace them with regular season games, but here's the thing. There's still a good number of teams, half, 3/4 of the teams in the NFL, and don't play anybody in the preseason. And now you're asking those teams, the Sean McVay types, shall we call them that? You're asking them to not only play their best players, but play them in a game that matters in August. To say nothing of how we need to keep the Miami Dolphins they got to start the season on a 4-game road trip. You can't put teams outdoors in pads and helmets against the Miami Dolphins in August. I know these are gladiators and all that, but come on now. Miami can't play a home game in August. At least not one where their best players are expected to play for an entire game. I don't hate the double bye. But I think we're good because we just don't need this many games. I get the sentiment. The sentiment is more NFL and less everything else. Look, I'm with you. I look forward to the NFL season. I consume the NFL at the level that most Americans do. But I'm good with the predictions and the offseason talk and let's get into the draft and free agency and I enjoy the offseason. I think Joe Burrow brought up the double bye. That I heard him say that too. I have to look into it, but I think it's too long. I do. I don't need more NFL games. And I'm not a fan of expanding the playoffs either. Mark my words, either the Chargers or the Packers are going to get absolutely mollywopped this weekend. One of those two teams is going to get destroyed. Because every year, one of the 2 7 seeds, you look at and you go, they don't really belong here, do they? Don't need 7 playoff teams in each conference, and I don't need the 17th game. I just don't. I would say probably most people would agree with you. I might be in the minority on that. But we're done with the regular season. 16 games, 17 games. It's now when it really matters, right? 14 teams. Some great matchups this weekend. Very much looking forward to getting into some of these games with you the rest of the week. For now, I very much appreciate your patronage, especially those of you tuning in for the first time on 740 KVOR. I hope that you make this a regular part of your listening during the day. And I hope to hear from you soon on the text line or the phone line. Again, top of the hour, Extra Sports 1300. It will be the Nuggets and Sixers on KVOR. It is Mark Levin. Talk to you tomorrow.